So first up, we have Debbie Dunham joining us. She is our Chief Sales Officer here at Dropbox. Just recently started with us. She's located in Austin. Debbie, so glad to have you. Feel free to tell the ladies a little bit more about yourself.
Thanks, Monique. I'm so happy to be here. I've been a long Dress for Success advocate, proponent, and involved here in Austin. All right, important note, there would be that picture, and then there's the current hair, which is the COVID hair, because you can't get your haircut like that every 4 weeks nowadays. So I decided I would grow my hair out for COVID. So therefore, that's the first lesson I would share with you guys. Always be ready to adapt. But I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. You know, I grew up in mostly in New York and mostly Michigan, and I was the oldest, and I had 3 younger brothers. And at the time I grew up, my father made it very clear to me that it was much more important for my brothers to go to school and get a degree because they were going to have to get married and support their families. So I was only allowed to get a 2-year degree if I wanted to go to college. And he strongly suggested that I get a degree to be an administrative assistant, which is what I did for my first year of college. But I had gotten a job working at General Motors whenever I wasn't in college, and I got to do really fun things like run an assembly line one summer, run a shipping and receiving dock another summer, work in engineering and sales. And luckily enough, lots of the folks at General Motors said, you should get a 4-year degree. So I went and agreed to a loan from my father with interest, and I signed a note. And then I worked 4 jobs, and then I got student loans from the government. And I got my 4-year degree in business and went to work for GM full time. At the time they decided to move me from Michigan to the great state of Texas, they didn't send me to Austin, they sent me to West Texas, and I got to live in Abilene. After I got there, I found out it had been that geography of sales that I was going to be responsible for, calling on GM car dealers, had been in last place for 12 years. I was the only female in the whole territory of 5 states. When I went to call on a lot of the car dealers, they told me that when GM wanted to send them a real sales manager, that they could talk to him. And until then, I could get on down the road. So I had a really interesting introduction to the state of Texas, but being self-willed, in 9 months, I tripled the output of my 82 car dealers and moved the district from last to first place. And that was the beginning of my career in sales. I didn't immediately pick sales, but I loved interacting with people. And from there, when General Motors wanted to send me back to Michigan, I said no. I went to work for an oil and gas company where I met my husband. We ultimately moved to Peru for a couple of years and came back to Austin. And when we came back, we had no money. We had, my oldest stepdaughter was starting college and my youngest was in 7th grade, and we had no jobs and we had no money. So we started over. We took out a big business loan. We drove cars with no air conditioning. We tied 2 twin beds together to make a full bed, but you can put a piece of wood on there and a mattress and it works. And so for the last 30 plus years, I've had the luxury of working in the technology industry and sales. And I worked my way up from a sales rep. I've worked at lots of companies, Compaq, HP, Dell, Cisco, Microsoft, now Dropbox. And I've had the amazing opportunity to lead sales teams in technology around the world. I didn't pick technology, it kind of picked me through a networking of a friend of a friend. I started in technology with a job that I only got a check if I sold something. Other than that, I didn't get paid. I was on what they call full commission, meaning when I sold something, they paid me. And if I didn't sell anything, I didn't make any money. So I've been really, really lucky and honored to work for amazing companies, lead amazing teams, and had lots of amazing opportunities and learnings along the way. Because as you might have seen, there's a theme. I didn't pick any industries that are traditionally supportive of women all the time. Looking back, I might have chosen something a lot more fun, like, I don't know, shoes or jewelry, but here I am, 35 plus years in technology sales, and it's been a great career for me, but started in a very different way and learned lots of interesting lessons along the way that happy to take questions on or learn, help you guys learn from any of those experiences. So Monique, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Debbie. I'm excited to dig in. I've been taking notes over here and definitely want to hear a little bit more about your experience with GM and how that all went down. So awesome. Next up, Debbie, you can go ahead. We have Caitlin, who is our DEI program manager here. She's actually worked a couple of positions here at Dropbox and can definitely speak to kind of the journey of rerouting your career, promoting yourself into other careers. So Caitlin, Take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Monique. And I'm super excited to be here. As mentioned, my name is Caitlin O'Dowd. I am an internal programs manager at Dropbox on the D, E, and I team, diversity, equity, and inclusion. My background, actually, my educational background is in women and gender studies, Africana studies, and public policy. And at the time when I went to college, people were like, well, what are you going to do with that? And now looking at our current climate and our current state of affairs in the United States, it's finally a time where people are like, oh, that's a great thing to have on your resume. So in some ways, I'm very, very excited to have had that education under my belt coming into our current day and age. In terms of my career, so my background is in international nonprofit management in terms of what I've done before I got into tech. So with my education, I pivoted towards doing international nonprofit management. I had some public policy, both domestic and international, and I ended up working overseas for almost 4 years in Cairo, Egypt, Poland, England, in the UK largely, and then came back to the United States and was in DC where I took a couple of internships and worked also at Trader Joe's on the side, and took some unpaid internships to kind of get my name out there in terms of the Washington, DC nonprofit competitive space. But I actually, kind of taking us even farther back, I grew up abroad. And my father worked for the Foreign Service and my mother was in public health, international public health research. And so I grew up in Jordan, Oman, Syria, Tunisia, graduated high school in Israel. And so I had made some connections there throughout my childhood where I was able to take my education and my focus on women and gender, women and girls education and barriers to education back overseas after college. And it was an interesting time growing up in the Middle East. Many of those places you can't actually visit as an American citizen anymore. But I think leaving the United States, well, leaving overseas to come back to the United States, I applied to a variety of different colleges and got into one of the best liberal arts schools in the United States through an affirmative action program. And so in terms of my personal identity and how I learned about that, perhaps later in my life in a certain way in terms of exposure in the United States, is a big part of why I'm in the current role and bring the amount of passion that I do to my current scope and passions therein. So I'm happy to speak to that, happy to speak to career shifts and thoughts about how to get into the new tech and this myth of getting your foot in the door from non-traditional background and how to mitigate that as a woman of color in this space. So I'll turn it back over to Monique and excited for the rest of the panelists here to give their intros.
Yes, totally want to dig into more about your college experience and the affirmative action program that you were in. I know a lot of times people don't want to necessarily have their diversity label be the thing that get them into certain places, but definitely something we should talk about. So thank you, Caitlin. And next up, we move to Kelly. I get the privilege of working under her. So super excited to have you here and speaking today, Kelly. She is our Director of Technical Recruiting here at Dropbox. So Kelly, you have the floor.
Awesome, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and also a little nervous, so bear with me. But I'll talk you through a little bit about my career and just how I got here. So when I first started working, I just optimized for the most money I could make with the most flexible and short and tense schedule I could have. So these were jobs like service, restaurant promotions, childcare, things like that. Ultimately, I probably had 3 of these at any given time just to help get from month to month. I realized at one point that none of these things I was passionate about or actually really enjoyed. And so I started to think a little bit more long-term. What is really going to, where do I actually want to be in 5 and 10 years? And honestly, I don't think there's no pressure to ever make that decision. And there's probably no right answer on that. There's no way we could really even see 6 months down the line. 2020 has proven that. So what I really asked myself then is, what do I want? And what am I working towards? So there are 2 things specifically. One is that I wanted to be financially independent. I wanted no man to help me. I wanted no reliance on my family. So that was huge. 2 is I want to do something that I was good at and that I could feel good about doing, but I just didn't know how to link those 2 things together. So I got a very low paying job with a commercial printing company. And despite the fact that this is a dying industry, I took it because it offered rotations. So actually very similar to what Debbie was talking about earlier. Every few months I'd switch my role. So I go 3 months on the printing presses, 3 months in bindery, 3 months in planning, 3 months in accounting. And while it was not glamorous, I was finally able to really start a checklist of the things that I was good at, also really bad at, and what I liked and what I disliked. So there were plenty of things that I was really bad at, but just for my own confidence, we're not going to relive that past. But there started to be a few things that stood out that I both liked and I was good at. And in most cases, those two things go hand in hand. So a couple of things. I love connecting with people. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. That type of like building that respect and rapport was fun for me, and I enjoyed it, and I wanted to build that respect. I'm a hustler. I like to work hard. I like to get things done, and generally a taskmaster. I like to sell a brand over selling a product. And I'm also still particularly dollar motivated. So I need a job that pays competitively and increasingly so given time and scope. And I didn't know it at the time, but these are very clearly strengths to be a good recruiter. I just didn't know that recruiting was a career path. So I just worked really hard in this small company to build that respect. And when I did, from that small company, I started to move along, really start to network and start to build some type of credibility with individuals at the corporate headquarters. And after 3 years, an opportunity came my way. It was to get paid less and move from California to Texas, but I took it. And I left my partner of 6 years, my family in Sacramento, for a job in recruiting at the headquarters in Houston, Texas. And this was like my first real like office job. And for a lot of people didn't understand that choice. And for me, I just felt like I finally got my first break. I had worked so hard to get there, and this was just, I kind of had to listen to myself in this and just say like, no, I think this is really where I want to go. This is something I want to explore. And it was worth it at that time. So, and it was. Ultimately, I'm here 10 years later, which I would say in a very cushy tech job with an amazing company, and work with incredible people. But it was that choice, and a lot of work then between the last 10 years, but it was that choice to put myself first, I would say, towards something that I believed in that was really important. So.
Awesome. I love how you talked about like kind of scoping out the things that you liked and were interested in, and then using those to kind of figure out your ideal career. So would love to dig more into that too.
I had no idea, y'all. Like you just go and start working and work hard and you'll get there. Yeah. Thank you, Mo.
Thanks, Kelly. And next up, we have Paige, who will be presenting to us today. She's coming from San Francisco, and she is our design research manager.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I am a design research manager, which is this really fun intersection of psychology and product development and design. It's an area that I really didn't know existed until a few years ago. And talk about like finding your passion. I absolutely love it. I run the design team for growth at Dropbox. And since joining Dropbox, I've managed a team called Ecosystem, which simply means how Dropbox interacts with other things like PDFs and tools like Slack. And I have a really fun time with my team here. I was born and raised in a very, very small town in South Mississippi, and it is not a town in which people leave. In fact, I'm one of 3 people that I know of at this moment from my town that lives in San Francisco. I got on my first airplane when I was 19 years old. There was absolutely no plan for me to leave. I was to maybe go to a 2-year college, raise a family, and enjoy my life as a housewife. And leaving was very different than what my peers were doing. But I had a desire to become a news reporter. And so I went to college and I got my degree in journalism. I worked at a television station not far away from my house. I stayed at my house, and I would drive an hour and a half each morning to go to work. And it happened to be the station that broadcasted through Hurricane Katrina. And I had started my job a mere 3 weeks before Hurricane Katrina hit. And so it was an incredible learning experience. I learned what it meant to be a vital voice for people. People would come to our station looking for answers and looking for news and looking for help. And it was an incredible thing to be part of. It also affected my family. We lost part of our house in Hurricane Katrina. So it was definitely a formative chapter in my life. I was getting ready to move stations because you don't make very much money in news until you move to different markets. And I was living on vending machine food for dinner. And I got an opportunity to move abroad to go to the Middle East and do what I now know is field research. They were looking for a journalist. I will tell you this, it's a common thread. I was not qualified for this. It was one of those situations where I thought, this is absolutely insane, but I don't know if I'll ever get this opportunity again. I'm just going to have to take it. And so I moved to the Middle East and worked in a country called Oman, and I did field research in the Gulf countries. So I spent a lot of my time going between countries like the UAE and Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, and Yemen. And I was researching for companies that wanted to come build businesses in the Gulf, how decisions were being made. It was not necessarily a super friendly environment for a single woman. It was very weird to people that I was living in that country as a single woman. I would get asked often if my parents were mad at me because they had sent me to this country. So I definitely learned how to hold my own. More than once, I was in a meeting where a man would look at me and say, "I've never worked with a woman before." And as a young, 24-year-old, I would have to take a deep breath and say, well, you're working with one now, so here we go. But it was a great learning experience. When I moved back to the States, I was hired by Dell. I moved to Austin, Texas, and Dell hired me. And again, it was one of those experiences where the hiring manager became my career advocate, and she saw something in me that she took a chance on. Resume wise, I was not qualified for the role, but she took a chance on me, and that has led to where I am today. I think I would be presented with job opportunities that I didn't check off every box. And it was very easy to say, I'm not qualified for this. And I have imposter syndrome in that way. But I also believe that you only learn when you take the things that terrify you. And so I did. I now am in San Francisco. I'm a mom to 2 young kids. I have a 3-year-old and an 8-month-old. And I love what I do. Again, no one from my community really leaves. And so they think that I have the strangest life. But I absolutely love it. And if there's a common theme for me to share, it's that you will never feel like you are 100% able to do something or that you're prepared to do something. You just take the risk because you have the ability. You do. So thanks for letting me share.
Oh my gosh, such an amazing story, Paige. First of all, love the hair. I love the color change. But second, totally hit the nail on the head with the imposter syndrome, with working with your hiring manager and her being your advocate, and also just putting yourself out there for a job where you may have not had all of the qualifications for, but when opportunity comes knocking, why not? So love it. And finally, we have Jessica. We got her through acquisition with HelloSign. She's joined the team and quickly become a superstar. So we're super excited to have you here, Jess.
Hi, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here today and have the opportunity to not only hear stories from all of you, but to also share a couple things that I learned along the way in my career. So I am here in San Francisco, California, and I am a technical sourcer for Dropbox. I basically search for talent for Dropbox in the technical industry. So a little bit about myself. I grew up in the Bay Area, a little bit outside of San Francisco City. And my parents are actually immigrants who came to the US from Turkey and Mexico. And they did this to find better opportunities for themselves and for their future family. So I grew up with, a lot of pressure to be the first one in my family to build a career here in the US, to go to college, to just do a lot of firsts. And, you know, there's some pressure that comes along with that, knowing that your family sacrificed a lot for you. So a big theme in my life was that I genuinely didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't grow up saying, you know, I want to be a firefighter one day, or I want to be a scientist. I really felt until until now that I wasn't sure what I was meant to do career-wise. So, and I realize now that your career is a lifelong learning process and an opportunity to grow and learn, and you don't exactly have to know what you want to do from, you know, day one. So I was lucky enough to get into college, and I majored in communication studies. I graduated, and then I found myself feeling that same way once again. What am I going to do? What do I want to do? And I wasn't quite sure. And, you know, when you look at it in such a large scale, it's quite daunting and scary. But a life lesson that I've learned is there's no need to feel that way or think that way. Adjust your thought. And that's exactly what I did. I decided to take steps and just get myself out there in any way that I could. So I started my career working for my family's furniture store. As an only child, I didn't want to rely on my family. I really wanted to be financially independent. So I went ahead and took that first step. You know, I didn't exactly want to work for the family business, but again, it's important to take steps and get yourself out there. So that's what I did, and where I started. I wore many hats, and I did everything I could do to learn and just be a sponge. I did retail sales. I also did social media and marketing for the furniture business. My first step into figuring out where I wanted to be was simply through networking. Another huge life lesson that I've learned is it is so important to reach out to friends, friends of friends, LinkedIn connections, you know, to not be shy. And there are a lot of people out there who are willing to help. You never know how that can help you down the line, even if, you know, one door closes, one door opens later on. And a big part of that is through networking. So I started meeting with people and reaching out, going to coffee simply to say, tell me about what you do. What do you do? Do you like what you do? So I did this, and I realized, you know what, I'm going to continue sales, and I want to see if I can get into the city where there's more job opportunity. Baby steps. So I did. I got a job at Yelp in tech sales. And over time, I was able to develop all these skills that then helped me get a more technical sales job. And that was at HelloSign. So again, I took steps, I built my skills, I learned how to tell my story and how to apply my skills and layer them to where I could move forward in my career. And I was a sales representative at HelloSign, which I then realized there were things about sales that I loved and things that I didn't love and that I didn't want long term. So once again, I felt like, where am I going with this? So instead of freaking out, I used my networking. I met with friends and coworkers. I had coffee with people. I had coffee with a colleague at HelloSign who was in recruiting. And he said, well, Jess, the skills that you have are applicable to recruiting. Why don't we talk about that? And he introduced me to the right people. He opened a door for me that I am so grateful that I had. You know, I was lacking a lot of technical knowledge, but I had someone take a chance on me and believe in me. And I found a way to use my skills from the past and apply them to this new opportunity. And I had that confidence in myself over time. So I got a job in recruiting as a technical sourcer. And so really, if there's anything that I'd like to share and pass along is, you know, be confident in yourself. Don't feel pressure to have some long-term goal or, you know, sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes you just have to take steps, build your skills, and network along the way, and you never know where you can end up. So today I'm really in what I would say is like a role that's really good for me, and I'm happy. And yeah, I hope those lessons that I've learned can help some of you.
Yeah, tons of gems in there. I think one of the biggest things too is internal networking as well. I think people think like, okay, I want to make a move. I need to start talking to people elsewhere and at other companies. Mm-hmm. But even with you, you were able to make the transition in networking internally and finding out about other jobs. I also loved what you said about like layering your skill set. Really love that idea, and just kind of building up your skills into this position. So really good points there. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Are like an all-star team. We're perfectly on time. So I know I'm working with like the best people today. So then we'll just jump into moderated QA here. Gabby can go ahead and drop our slide and we can get comfy with everybody's faces. Kelly, if you don't mind, I want to start with you because in your story, you mentioned how you kind of took that first leap coming to Austin, even though people thought it was crazy, and taking a job that maybe paid less, and thinking about a position that you're in now where you know, you have a family, you have responsibilities and things to think about, where I think a lot of us are in that position. How do you know what is, you know, a good opportunity, or what types of opportunities are worth taking, especially when you're worried about, you know, but I have a family, but I have bills, but.
Yeah, and I don't have a great answer because everyone's situation is going to be so unique. Yes, like when I took that risk, I was in a time in my life where I had no family. Like, yes, I have family local to me, and they were curious why the heck I would move so far away. But like ultimately, I was independent. So that is a very different situation than when you've got a family relying on you. So I think for me, and this is pretty basic, but I'll do a really solid pro-con list and really identify like, what are the things that I really need right now? Like even in the previous job I went in from this one going into Dropbox, it's really important to me to be like, and what am I getting now? Like what do I need to get? Whether it's a skill set, whether it's some type of additional like resume build or exposure to something, like I needed that to be really clear. And so when you're looking for jobs, I think sometimes it's just easy to like prioritize maybe whether the money is there or that it is local to you. I would take a nice look at that list of things that's really key, and try to prioritize the things that will not set you up for success in this career, but the next one. I tend to think about that a little bit more as like, this next job you get is probably not the end all be all. It's that you're setting it up for the next one. So yeah, not a great answer there, but a nice pro-con list and getting your thoughts together beforehand is highly recommended.
Pro-con lists are everything. The end all.
Yes.
And Caitlin, just bringing it to you and thinking about starting to apply for jobs and putting yourselves out there for different opportunities. You had mentioned using or getting into school via the affirmative action program. And a lot of us working in recruiting, you know, companies are putting specific emphasis on hiring more women and more people of color. So wanted to see if you could just kind of speak to leaning more into that instead of kind of running away from it and saying, well, I don't want them to hire me just because I'm a woman or similar.
Apologies. I think the experience of getting into the college that I did, Hamilton College, through the affirmative action program was, given what it was the only way that I was going to get to go to that school. It offered, you know, not only a chance for me to have additional support from a mentoring perspective, and to be around my peers, a group of my peers, women and underrepresented minorities as well, but it also provided me with the financial assets that I needed in the way of stipends for books, access to some of the best on-campus jobs. I was a bouncer. That's a story for another panel. But being able to have some of that access points that I wouldn't have otherwise had was why I was like, well, why would I not take that level of support? If someone's looked at me for this opportunity, and it was branded as an opportunity program, and I appreciated that because that's how I in turn saw the program, is that it was an opportunity for me. I think about how, you know, I continue to show up as it relates to being a mixed race woman, and that intersectional experience and how I tie it and weave it into my brand. For me, it's very simple in that it ties into my work and the scope of my work as a DEI professional. So that's easy. But let's say, you know, if you're in another field, if you're in another industry, if you're in another role, you know, are you nervous about bringing that brand? And I think I think brand, and I'm not talking about how you write a brand statement, right? If that helps you to think about your brand and how you show up, that's a first step. But I think the essence of you and all that you are and all that makes you stand out, especially in an industry like tech, where numbers tend to be representation, numbers tend to be small, that can be a part of your brand. That can be a part of who you are and how you sell yourself, and that's okay. And I think we receive a variety of different messaging around, you know, what we should be credited for, what we should be looked at for. But if that, you know, your identity and your membership is a huge part of your brand and the essence of who you are and the passion and difference and uniqueness that you bring to who you are as an individual and the experience therein, you know, why would that not be a part of your selling statement?
That was beautiful. Now, Debbie, you had mentioned quite a few kind of stories of barrier after barrier when you were with GM and kind of them just looking at you as the woman on the team, and then also coming back from crew and really having to start from the ground up. So I wanted to hear about things that you did or strategies or measures that you took in order to really get through these barriers, identify what they were, and then work past them.
Yeah, thanks. I think the first one is that there's always going to be barriers, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are in your career, no matter geographically where you live, there's always going to be barriers. And, you know, I think it's super easy. And, you know, I suffered from this, I would say earlier in my career, to say, well, they must be right. And I'll just have to try harder. And, you know, I just kept thinking if I just showed up and did the right thing, that ultimately it would all work out. And what I realized after, you know, some time with lots of those things happening was that no, I had to believe in myself. And I actually had to have the courage to stand up for myself and not wait for other people to stand up for me. So I learned a couple of things. I learned that it was really important to be gutsy, right? Like be gutsy, take a risk. I think a couple of us had some similar themes, right? Every time I raised my hand and said I should get that promotion or I should get that job, in my heart of hearts, I was like, holy smokes, I have no idea how to do that job, but I'll figure it out when I get there. So that was the be gutsy part, Monique, right? So number one was have the courage of my own convictions. Number two, be gutsy. And the third thing that was really like completely earth shattering for me was that I had to realize that I didn't have to show up and conform to anybody else's ideal of what they thought I was supposed to be. Like I didn't have to like be that nice little gal who was just going to quietly sit in the corner. I didn't have to do what my father expected, that I'd get married and never have a career and, you know, raise a family, and that my brothers would be the people that had careers. Ironically, by the way, y'all, it turned out completely different. So I was kind of happy about that. Sorry, boys. Sorry, bros. And so I really had to learn that, you know, I just wasn't going to let any of those things be a barrier. And in fact, they ultimately became a challenge for me. And it was like, I'm going to show you how I can leap tall buildings, right? It took me a while to find my voice. Another one piece of advice I would give everybody is, you know, and Caitlin was just talking about it, know who you are, know what your voice is, make damn sure that it's heard loud, clear, often, and for all the right reasons, right? And then the last thing I would say is, you know, I'm incredibly lucky. I have the most amazing husband in the world. He has been my best cheerleader, my best champion, my best supporter. He's there when for the bad days, he celebrates the good days with me. And, you know, no matter who you have to hold hands with as you walk through life, they can be the biggest support when all those really icky things happen. He gave his career up 15 years ago to always be here for the family and myself, for example. And he was the guy who drove the car with no air conditioning. And he was the guy that put the twin beds together with rope. And so, you know, the last thing I would say, Monique, that really made it all possible for me is I had somebody by my side through all of it.
And I love that he's the cheerleader and just partners, period, but gender specific in this situation. I love that he was able to just kind of fall back, recognize your greatness, and support you in whatever way you need it. That's awesome.
Exactly.
Awesome. I think when you were talking about, you know, not looking at things as barriers and instead just looking at it as a challenge, it can be hard sometimes when you're dealing with imposter syndrome. And Paige, you mentioned that. I think, like you said, when you grew up, you were in a small town in Mississippi. Fortunately, you know, you moved, you took on other opportunities. But for people who are kind of conditioned to seeing, like, okay, when I get out of school, this is what I'm supposed to do. I get married, I make a baby, whatever, whatever. Like, how do you get out of that thinking? How do you break that thought of, this is the bubble that I'm supposed to live in, these are the things that I'm capable of?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I will say that I was at a networking event a few years ago, and there was a person from a very big company speaking, and they were talking about what they look for in their ideal candidate. And one thing they mentioned was Ivy League. They look for candidates who come from Ivy League schools. And my heart sunk. This was probably 7 years ago or so, because that is not me. That is not my background. And I thought, well, I immediately crossed that company off my list, and never again did I consider them. And so I think that one thing I deal with working in San Francisco is that imposter syndrome, being surrounded by people who, you know, did go to, you know, Ivy League schools, and I can look at that and think, oh my goodness, I'm not nearly as smart as they are. But that is a lie. They don't have my experience. And that's the thing that you have to remind yourself about. Other people do not have your specific experience. They didn't walk your path. And you bring a special experience and background to your role. The other thing that is helpful, and just a logistical thing that you can do, is start making a list of everything that you have done and achieved. Have that record down. You led this project, you did this thing, you made these pathways open up, and reflect on that list. When you start to doubt yourself and doubt whether or not you are appropriate for, you know, a role that would be a big step up, look at that list. Like, you've done stuff, you have made things happen, and remind yourself about that. And then the one other thing I would say is, if you are presented with a job opportunity and you do not feel like you are qualified for it, remind yourself that there is a reason I gave you that offer. There's a reason why they want to hire you. You are equipped for it. And there's a lot you're going to learn on the job. True. I've never come to a job where I felt like I know everything. And I don't feel like I know everything now, but you are going to learn that. There's a reason why they looked at you and they said, we're going to give this person an offer. And so I think those things help me battle imposter syndrome. I will say it is a daily challenge. It's something I have to battle a lot. But I think those things help me to overcome it.
Thank you so much.
Oh, can I have a quick comment? I just want, Paige, thank you. That was perfect. One thing I wanted to know is not only the imposter syndrome, but going out into the market and trying to get a job is brutal. It comes with a lot of rejection. I just want to make a quick note, and I tell this to everybody, that if they don't want you, you don't want them, because you're not going to be successful in that environment. So I just want to keep your head up as you feel like, I applied for 100 jobs a day, only heard back from one. That is absolutely okay. But just a reminder, if they don't want you, you don't want them. Keep moving forward.
And this is from a recruiting professional, people, so it's the real deal. Jess, I wanted to talk to you more about self-advocacy, because it seems like you did a super excellent job of that, of just saying, like, okay, these are the things that I did with the family biz, and now I'm going to take these things and put myself out there and kind of market myself into these other positions. So any tips, strategies you have, great mindsets that you have or used?
Yes, absolutely. So there's a couple of things that I would like to share. I think that one main lesson that I learned that is very important is learn how to tell your story and practice it. Like you were saying, Paige, make a list of what you're good at, what you've done, and then each time you interview for a new job opportunity, you look at the role that you're applying for and you see what specific skills they are looking for, and then creatively craft your message to tailor the skills that they are looking for, which might include only half of your list or your whole list. I don't know. But each time you interview and each time you craft that story, you get better at it. You learn how to better tell your story of your skills and your success, and you learn how to better craft it towards each interview you have, which makes you a better storyteller. And honestly, that is such a crucial part of getting to the next level in your career, in my opinion. And that's really how I did it. On top of that, like I mentioned earlier, being very involved, networking, you know, you never know who can open a door for you down the road. It really pays off to be a good person and to help other people within, you know, within your company as well as outside of your company. It pays off. I built very strong relationships with people at HelloSign, which then who then advocated for me to move into a technical recruiting role where I really didn't have all of the technical skills that I needed. But because I had such strong relationships with different people on different teams, they all advocated for me and said, you know, she is a good person, she is a hard worker, and that really helped me get the job that I'm now really, really happy in. So again, do the extra stuff, take extra steps, you know, go network, go mingle, have coffees with people and just learn about what they do. And then own your skills, learn how to tell your story. And I think that's what's really worked for me. And I think that's, yeah, my main takeaway.
Just piggybacking off of what Jessica mentioned is don't be afraid to ask for the coffee chat either. Most people are like super flattered and happy to just talk with you. So regardless of level, where they're at, and especially now virtually, I mean, you can pop on a Zoom with pretty much anybody. So I have a million more questions for y'all, but want to take a moment to open it up to our attendees and see if we can just have a moment for kind of open Q&A. Feel free to
Okay, all right, my name is Deborah, and I wanted to ask the panel, no one in particular. I know Jessica said this a lot about networking. So what is your advice, or what secret or tips could you give us or give me for being an effective networker?
I have one bit of advice I'm happy to share quickly. Something that I recommend is if you go onto LinkedIn, if you're a part of any volunteer group, or if you know, have connections from a school or from a past job. I've had people from my college, for example, reach out to me, complete strangers, saying, hey, I'm interested in recruiting. I see you're a recruiter now. Can we hop on a quick call? I'd love to learn more about you. It's just not being shy to use any kind of common connection that you may have and get creative, and just don't be scared to reach out to people. Worst thing they can say is, sorry, I don't have time. You know, but most people are willing to help. So yeah, LinkedIn is a great tool for that. And again, school, past jobs, volunteer groups, anything like that. Go hunt for people in those groups that you have commonalities with to then reach out and speak to them and learn from them.
Okay, I have one, and I don't want to take up anybody's time, but we're dealing with a panel of very successful women today. But there are some pieces of legislation coming out where, and then of course with the notorious RGB's untimely death, how these things are going to impact negatively the ascent of women in the workplace, specifically also to women of color. Because I think President Trump, in terms of affirmative action, I should say workshops and making sure that people are aware of the different laws for not being, I don't want to say racist, but that's the gist of it. He's planning on cutting that out. So is that going to impact women negatively?
I don't know if we have a solid answer around the potential impact, but Caitlin, if you have any just kind of general information about the landscape, I don't know if we can speak specifically to, you know, politics and what may happen, but just generally speaking.
Yeah, I think as time goes on and we tend to see more of these basic rights to access and education encroached upon, that it becomes more real and it becomes more personal. And I know as feminists, we like to say that personal is always political. So many of us have always been living in that world where access points have been out of reach, glass ceiling, and opportunities haven't always been as available or accessible as they are to other people. I do think that me personally, as I see more of what's going on, specifically limitations around unconscious bias trainings, DEI trainings in general for federal employees. One, I'm thankful that I'm privileged enough to not be working in that sector. And then two, I'm like, let me get my affairs in order. And what do I need to do to ensure that I'm self-advocating, that I'm taking opportunities where they exist, that I'm tapping into my network. And when I'm tapping into my network, I'm not only going to common acquaintances or folks that know other folks, but I'm also saying directly to people, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm passionate about. Do you know anybody that does this? And that's all a part of the getting my affairs in order and making sure that I'm setting myself up for career success in light of the times. I think in terms of my personal work, it is becoming conflated, right? In terms of folks turning to us as a team and saying, well, what are we doing about this? What are we doing about that? And that's become a particular challenge as time has gone on. But I think personally in my career that it's been what it's always been, which is, am I making sure that I'm advocating for myself, for my salary? Am I in a safe environment? Do I have a network that I could fall back on? Am I showing up in a way that makes people know that I'm open to opportunities and that I'm deserving of them here in the moment? Am I selling myself short? So those are things that I have on repeat every day, regardless, because this is a timeless experience of being a woman and a woman of color in this time and age. But yes, it is becoming something that I think more and more about. I don't know if that's as helpful.
No.
A lot of unknowns.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Hi, my name is Blanca. I have a question. What did I didn't hear if anyone had like a health challenge or a health scare that kind of like possibly could have, or something like that was like kind of debilitating that may have happened to you. I know things are very personal, but like you would have to have overcome to be able to sell yourself and advocate for yourself and like, you know, like go through it to be able to continue to have that self-talk when something happened to you that like, I don't know, for me, it's affected my confidence and my security. And then I don't know like how I can feel confident about like, is this not going to happen again or something like that. So I don't know if I'm phrasing things right or whatever, but I was just curious for some feedback on that. Appreciate you ladies. Y'all are amazing, incredible women. Thanks.
I don't have a chronic illness that I can talk about, but I can share about a health situation that I dealt with last year. I lost a baby late into a pregnancy while I was at Dropbox. And it was one of those situations where I'm walking around Dropbox with a big pregnant belly on a Friday, and I lost my baby and had to deliver him on the Saturday. And so suddenly all of these projects that I'm working on, all of my stakeholders, this comes to a complete pause. And what do I do? And there's no guidebook for how to navigate this at work because I looked for one. I thought, how on earth do I do this? And I was managing a team. And so I really had to learn what the value of transparency looks like. because when I returned from work 2 months later, I didn't have a pregnant belly. And so I decided that the best thing for me was to share with my team what had happened, because I knew questions were going to be asked in their mind. And I would have rather just cleared the air. And so instead of knowing that they were going to ask themselves, I just said it. And I also and again, this is where advocates come into play. I had some advocates that I deeply trusted at work, who I worked with to help my transition become a little bit smoother. I had missed out just logistically on some like business decisions that had been made in my absence. I needed to ramp back up in work. My confidence was shot because I felt like I was walking around with this like sign on me that was like, lost a child. And so I really depended on the people that I trusted at work to help build that strength back up in myself. What I learned is that there's not a guidebook on this. I am writing the guidebook. So in this particular situation, I am the one that has to share my experience with others so that when they go through a similar situation, they know what to do. From a company standpoint, I was lucky to work at a company that completely supported me and supported the time that I needed to take. All of my work was internal. I had the support system from a logistical standpoint. I just needed to work on my internal confidence, and it was a daily. It was a daily process. It took a long time. And I think whenever you're dealing with health issues too, you're dealing with, you're not able to be completely present at work. And so I also had to work through that and really work through grief too. None of it's been easy. It's a daily challenge, but I believe that your health issues, hopefully they aren't complete barriers. You have people around you that can support you in that. And if anything, they make you a stronger candidate because you bring a strength to the table that would not normally be brought to the table. So I hope that's helpful.
Yes, very helpful.
Debbie, were you popping in to say anything?
I just wanted to tell Paige thanks for sharing. That was really brave.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paige. Totally didn't think we were going to end on a sentimental note, but if there's any additional questions, we have about 2 minutes left. Any final parting tips or words from any of our panelists?
I have one last question very quickly. It sounds as if you women are very, I would say, young, but what advice would you give to older women trying to get a second, third, or fourth career? Some words of, I guess, wisdom or whatever, especially if you're hitting like almost 70. So, what words would you get? I say never give up, but what do you think?
So, Monique, can I take that one? I'm clearly the oldest person on the panel here. You guys, look at this. I've been in technology sales for 38 years. I graduated, from college in 1980. So I can totally speak to that. I learned a really interesting fact just in the last 24 hours. There's actually scientific data that shows, number one, we reach the peak of our creativity starting when we turn 60. Hallelujah, right? Second of all, if you go look at, yeah, I know, I'm like so happy, y'all. Second of all, if you go look at some of the people who've done some of the most amazing things in history, like inventions, writing classic opera and things like that, tons of it happened after they were 60 years old. I think that the world needs people that have a couple of years on them. There's so many incredible things that we've lived through, that we've witnessed, that we've experienced, and that we learned from. And the way I always think about it, and I will tell you, like, people are like, really? You're old. Really? Why are you still working? Or why, what makes you think you can do this job, right? I would tell you that I think that if you believe you can do it, you can convince anybody else that you can do it. And it just takes you being passionate and committed and showing them the value and the difference that you can bring to the table that other people can't. And if you sit down and listen to a bunch of the things everybody said, like, you know, Jessica and Kelly and some of the others, just write down the list of what you know. Holy cow. I mean, think of that. Just go to anybody and say, this is what I bring to the table. This is the difference I make. You can't get this anywhere else. I'm the person that can bring that to you. So I firmly believe that, you know, particularly in today's challenging times, people that have seen many, many, many different things in life, they're incredibly valuable in so many ways to any company.
Thank you so much, Debbie. All of you, thank you so much to our panelists, y'all sharing your amazing, seriously amazing stories. We appreciate you guys. And Dress for Success, like I said, if you're interested in any of our one-on-one panels, please get in contact with Teal for the remaining slots.